Last week, on Saturday morning, our 6-year-old, Gabriella, woke up just fine. Perfectly healthy. Then, much later in the day, in the afternoon, she took a nap. Yay. And then she went and watched a movie while I was doing work in my room. When I looked at her next, I noticed she still had a bunch of sleepers in her eyes from her nap. Much more than one would expect a couple hours after a nap. This set off a red flag for me. I had gone pink eye a few times as a kid and even once in college. This looked similar. So I decided not to waste time, and I called the advice nurse, just to be sure. Well, it took some time for the advice nurse to call me back, and by then, there was a lot of goop in her eyes. But no pinkness and no swelling on the eyelids. They kept asking me that. Well, the advice nurse called the doctor called me. It was a couple hours later that I finally got my mama bear hands on that prescription bottle of eye drops. And in just that short time, my baby girl's eyes had completely swollen closed. She could not open them at all, and they were painful. It hurt me to pry them open to put the drops in. But you gotta do what you gotta do. So a few times that night then, I had to walk my blind little girl to the bathroom because she couldn't even peek a little bit to see the ground. I had to do everything for her. When she wanted a snack, I had to carefully guide her downstairs where she ate an apple that she couldn't see. I began to wonder what had happened so that my precious little child had gone this horrible, awful, terrible, highly contagious virus. What had she touched? Was it something at kindergarten? Was it something at gymnastics? Was it the Costco shopping cart? The incubation time on this virus is up to 14 days. It could have been anything. Why hadn't she washed her hands before touching her eyes? Why wasn't she using more hand sanitizer? Come on. Did she sin? Did I sin? Was she being punished? You see, sometimes I think we like to find something to blame when someone is sick or hurt. It's out of our fear. If we didn't do whatever the person in those circumstances did, then maybe we'll be okay. If we didn't touch anything in a kindergarten class or gymnastics or at Costco and then touch our eyes before washing our hands, maybe we all will be safe from pink eye. I think we do this with anyone who is different than us and who has circumstances where we just really don't want to walk in their shoes. We victim blame. We maybe even do this with the man in the gospel today. If he or his parents sinned, and that's why he was born blind, and we try to follow the law, well then maybe we won't go blind, right? Except that's not how it works. Jesus does away with this false misconception that was especially popular back then, and I think maybe still is just as popular now. The idea that God rewards those who are obedient with wealth and health, and God punishes those who sin with having them struggle financially and struggle with their health. When the disciples ask, who sinned so that this man was born blind? Jesus says, you're asking the wrong question. That's not how God works. But just watch how God works. And then Jesus does something that turns upside down everything they all thought they knew about sin. When Jesus breaks a commandment. I'm not sure how else to spin that. I probably shouldn't be in politics. Right, find a way. But when Jesus can't wait one more day to heal this man who has been blind his entire life, by strict interpretation of the law, Jesus is breaking the commandment to keep the Sabbath day holy and do no work on it. And yet, we read that Jesus did not sin. So how can this be? Well, maybe it has something to do with the idea that while the commandments are good and important in how we live in relationship with one another, they are not all about morality. They aren't a checklist, so we can see how many more commandments you broke than you broke. And we can say, I'm better than you. The commandments are about identity. You see, sin, when we're bent over on ourselves, it's when we are separating ourselves or trying to separate ourselves from God and neighbor. Breaking the commandments are not necessarily in and of themselves sin. The commandments are tools for our identity. They help us to identify how we relate to God and each other so that we do not sin. The commandments connect us. But if for some reason there's some special situation where keeping the commandments would keep us from loving the Lord our God with all our hearts and minds and strength, and keep us from loving our neighbors, all of our neighbors, as ourselves, then in that case, keeping the commandment would cause us to sin. If Jesus had waited one more day, if he had let this man suffer, if he had not healed him, if he had not had mercy on him, if he had not revealed God in and through him, that would be when Jesus was sinning. Because you see, this man's life, it wasn't a prop. This man did not live his entire life struggling where there was no other possible vocation for him other than begging, just so that Jesus could come along one day and use him as an example. Any more then Gabby was struck by pink eye so that I could have a sermon illustration. God doesn't work that way. Neither of them were blinded for a reason or a purpose or a punishment. God does not cause pain to make examples out of us. But God does come into our pain to reveal and bring purpose and reason. Jesus comes into our dark places and brings us light. Just as Jesus was able to use this man's blindness to reveal just how much us mere mortals are loved, more than we can imagine, and that we are healed when we know that we are loved and welcomed and matter. So, well, yes, of course, we should and can and will try to live out the law as the Pharisees do. But if that brings us some false sense of morality that ends up cutting us off from God or our neighbors, each and any of our neighbors, then keeping that law would be causing us to sin. And we would be missing God's whole point. So instead, maybe we can rejoice that we have been freed from this false sense of security that we can somehow make ourselves good enough. We are healed in our identity as beloved and forgiven children of God. And we are sent to share this good news with the world. Amen.